Hi, I'm Joel Rosenberg, founder and editor-in-chief of All Israel News and All Arab News, and the host of the Rosenberg Report on TBN. Glad to be joined today by John Hannah. John is a key person at JINSA, the Jewish Institute for National Security Affairs. He was a key White House official working as a national security advisor for Vice President Dick Cheney during very tumultuous years in American national security and foreign policy endeavors. He has recently been to Saudi Arabia. So as Benjamin Netanyahu has just put together his new government and has said in every interview and podcast that I'm aware of so far in this blitz for his new book, he is saying that one of his three top priorities is not only to expand the Abraham Accords to other countries, but specifically to persuade Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman to make an historic peace treaty with Israel. John, welcome. Do you think that's possible? Let's just start with your first gut instinct, and then we'll back it up into your recent trip.
Well, hi, Joel, and thank you for having me, and hello to all of your viewers around the world. Listen, on our trip, I came away with a stronger impression that I've ever had that at least on the Saudi side, the top political and national security leadership in that country has made the decision that they are, in fact, prepared to make peace with Israel, to normalize relations. They see it very much in their strategic interest to do so. They told us we have the same threats as Israel, the same allies, and the same enemies, most importantly, specifically the Islamic Republic of Iran. And I have a sense that they have now really thought through the requirements that they need to be able to now cross that Rubicon and make a decision like the UAE, like Bahrain and Morocco have done, to actually normalize relations with Israel officially.
That's a huge headline, but it comes with the Hebrew word aval, which has become my favorite word here, which means however. Yeah. And it feels like everything you say in the Middle East is, this is true, aval, however, but there's another piece to this. And almost everybody who's listening to our podcast and an interview who doesn't know me will think that the aval here is the Palestinian issue. I have been saying that's not the primary issue. That's not the way I read it after my multiple trips to Saudi Arabia. What are you picking up? Is it the Palestinian issue, or is it the Biden administration, or what is it? Is it Bibi? What is the holdup? Because there is a holdup.
Right, there definitely is, Joel. But as you say, we came away with an almost unequivocal message that the problem from the Saudi perspective is not Israel, it's not the Palestinian issue, it is their lack of faith in the current state of the strategic relationship bilaterally between the United States and Saudi Arabia. They have looked around, they have been attacked in the past few years directly by Iranian drones and cruise missiles at their most critical oil infrastructure facility at Abqaiq. They say we were attacked. The United States did not respond. Over the course of the last several years, on arms sales, the United States has become a much less reliable and predictable supplier of the weapons that we feel are critical for our own defense. And third, on the Iranian nuclear issue, they say the U.S. keeps saying there are red lines that they want to stop and prevent an Iranian nuclear program. And yet we look in the region and the United States is taking none of the steps militarily to convince anyone that they're prepared to enforce those red lines about Iran's nuclear program. First and foremost, the Iranians themselves aren't convinced by that and therefore continue to push ahead. So the Saudis, the bottom line was they're saying, before we can normalize with Israel, which is what we want to do, we need much greater confidence that we've got a normal strategic partnership with the United States.
That's the headline. MBS to Biden, we have to normalize with you and the United States before we can normalize with Israel. Am I hearing that right?
I think that's exactly right, because when we did ask about the question of the Palestinians and isn't getting a resolution of the Palestinian issue absolutely critical for Saudi Arabia's ability to move with Israel, they told us unequivocally no. They have no faith that the Palestinians will be any more successful in making the difficult compromises for peace in the next 60 years that they haven't been willing to make in the last 60 years. And therefore, these two tracks, one trying to resolve the Palestinian problem, which everybody hopes can happen, but the separate track is normalization with Israel. And I think the leadership in Saudi Arabia has made a decision. They're no longer prepared to have that normalization track be held hostage to the inability of a corrupt and feckless Palestinian leadership to make the difficult decisions that peace with Israel would require.
Okay, so let me press you on a couple things. President Biden, has been horrible in terms of his statements about Saudi Arabia and its leadership. I mean, he has directly called the crown prince, who's the de facto leader now, with the king being as ill and infirm as he is, and we pray for him and that he is doing well, but he doesn't seem to be doing so well. He's clearly given the reins of the kingdom almost exclusively, almost entirely, to his son, Mohammed bin Salman, MBS. President Biden has called MBS a murderer and released, I think, a 4 or 5 page document from several years ago, which, as I described in my book, Enemies and Allies, you read through that document, there was no evidence. And more, I mean, if there is evidence, let's see it, because if he's a murderer, we have to deal with that. But if it's well, he's probably a murderer because that's just the way the system works. Well, wouldn't that be the equivalent of saying, well, the Saudis, the Iraqis probably have chemical weapons, and because they had them before, or President Trump has probably been colluding with the Russians because we just think how could he have won? But both of a war and a huge investigation of Trump proved those weren't really true. It's not that, by the way, Saddam didn't have any weapons or systems, but it wasn't what we thought. So circumstantial evidence isn't enough to throw an American ally, a critical ally in a critical region, under the bus. Biden has also called, of course, repeatedly MBS, a pariah, part of a pariah state. This is bad. Now, he did go, however, to Saudi Arabia last summer. Tell me what did you hear? Didn't that make things better? And maybe it did. Maybe incrementally it did. I'm not reading that it made things better. The Saudis don't seem to be acting like it made things better. And I think in part, my read, but I want to hear it because I haven't been there in several years now. My read is that the whole, like, I will come to your house, but I'm not sure if I'm going to meet with you. I might see him. I might see MBS, but I don't know. He might be in the room. All of that is a level of disrespect. And in a shame honor society, just arriving on Air Force One isn't enough.
I agree with you entirely, Joel. And that was certainly the vibe we got, that they appreciated that the president had reversed course enough that he decided to come to Riyadh, even if
it's not insignificant that he did do it.
It was not
insignificant. I give Biden credit for that, but he did it so ham-fistedly. And ham is not a big, pork's not a big thing there.
No, I agree that it was a good first step, I think, in Saudi eyes, but it was quickly overwhelmed by the brouhaha that immediately erupted publicly over the OPEC Plus decision in early October, to cut production by $2 million, 2 million barrels a day really in defiance of a request from the Biden administration, was essentially, can't you postpone this decision for a month until our midterm elections are finished? Otherwise, the decision itself will be heavily politicized. From the Saudi perspective, they thought, A, they had very good economic reasons in terms of the future of the energy market to make that cut. But then they feel that the subsequent decline in the price of oil, which we were already seeing when we visited in November, actually confirmed that they were right about the economic consequences of that cut, and the Biden administration was wrong. But the immediate reflex of President Biden after that decision, after that economic disagreement, was to immediately publicly say, we're going to impose consequences on Saudi Arabia. We're going to reevaluate and review the bilateral strategic partnership with Saudi Arabia. We got a sense from the Saudis, the word humiliation, that they were humiliated in front of their own people by this kind of public rebuke by their most important strategic partner that they've really invested all of their security marbles in. They depend so heavily on the United States. But more importantly, they said it sent a signal to the Iranians. It made our neighborhood that much more dangerous to have our worst enemies see that our most important strategic partner and security guarantor, the United States, does not have our back and will not support us. So it actually increased the sense of threat that the Saudis feel from the Iranians. So in lots of ways, I think the OPEC decision kind of did away with whatever marginal good the visit in July did for the president, and kind of put us back at square one, unfortunately.
Well, and I think it seems like what we've got is a very troubled marriage, because I think that Biden's decision to go means he realizes how important Saudi Arabia really is. You can't just cut the legs out from a key American ally, even when you have big disagreements and challenges. I think that the Biden administration doesn't see how humiliated MBS and his team are by being called murderers and pariahs. They have, again, I'm not here to litigate the Jamal Khashoggi situation, but in the absence of the Biden administration giving actual proof that MBS knew and ordered this, which are the key elements, he has arrested everybody involved and sentenced them. And so if Biden knows more, he has to tell us. If he doesn't, then he has to let that be the correction and realize that his language is harsher than it is, let's say, towards Recep Erdogan, a Turkish president who has thrown 200,000 people into prison, thrown more journalists into prison than any other NATO country in history combined. Like this is not the way he's treating Saudi Arabia is so much different than he treats other allies, and so then MBS feeling humiliated then reacts and says, I'm not going to help you in your midterm elections if that's what you're asking me to do. No. And then Biden feels humiliated. The question now I have for you is, re-enter Benjamin Netanyahu. Is he the marriage counselor that on behalf of the Saudis goes to President Biden, whom he's known for 40 some years? They have a bumpy relationship, but it's warm. It's just, what's the famous Biden line? They scrawled on I love you, Bibi, even though I don't agree with a darn thing you've said. And he didn't say darn, but we are an evangelical news site. So does Netanyahu have the clout to come in and say, listen, let's all take a deep breath. President Biden, you know that you need the Saudis. We've got to figure out a way. But there's a huge moment. Nobel Peace Prize, I would say, even though Trump deserved one and Netanyahu deserved one for the last 4 agreements. But there really seemed, is it possible that Netanyahu could thread this needle because what I'm hearing is not something that can't be fixed. I guess the question is, does Biden want to fix it, or does it have to wait for another American president, which, who knows what happens over the next 2 years in the region?
Yeah, no, I agree entirely, Joel. I spent a lot of time in the U.S. government, so I like to think that no American president is beyond reason. The president he openly claims to be a Zionist.
Right.
I think there's no reason to doubt his strong feelings about the importance of the U.S.-Israel relationship. He does have a long-standing relationship with Prime Minister Netanyahu, one that Prime Minister Netanyahu it obviously didn't have with somebody like President Obama. It is a much, much different relationship.
Right.
I think Netanyahu can really get a fair hearing, at least with Biden.
Right.
And I think at the margins, if he comes in, and after all, with the united Israel behind him on the importance of making peace with Saudi Arabia, everybody in Israel, whatever else they all disagree on,
Right.
they, I think, agree that it would be a huge boon to have peace with the Islamic world's most influential country. So I think if Netanyahu is able to come in and make that case to President Biden that a peace with Saudi Arabia is, in fact, absolutely vital for Israel's well-being and security in this region, and that we cannot do it without a major assist from the United States. Despite all of America's bilateral issues with MBS, whatever they might be, we really need you to come in and help us in making this peace with Israel, with Saudi Arabia, the same kind of role you played in Camp David with Egypt, in the role you played with Jordan, in the role that President Trump played with the 4 accords of the Abraham Accords. And I think Prime Minister Netanyahu will get a hearing for that. And we all know that whatever controversies may still exist about his appearance in Congress in 2015 to talk against the Iran nuclear deal, and whatever bruised feelings there may be among certain elements of the Democratic Party, he is a man with real stature, real credibility, real knowledge and experience on these issues. And again, at the margins, I think he can make a big difference. And I think he can make a difference in giving President Biden some cover on Capitol Hill as well. I think there probably are influential members of the Senate and the House of Representatives, if they hear the case from Israeli diplomats and statesmen across the board, and most importantly, Prime Minister Netanyahu, about the importance of getting the Saudi relationship right. I think we keep our fingers crossed. I don't think anything is in the bank, but I think the stars could be aligned to have real influence on the Biden administration in a very positive way on this issue, provided we don't get distracted by other things in the U.S.-Israel relationship regarding the Palestinian question or other issues that unrelated to Saudi Arabia and Iran and national security issues.
Right. I'll take the Temple Mount as one issue where I wrote a column the other day that, look, like every Israeli has the right to go up to the Temple Mount and visit it. It is, our sacred site of 2 temples. Jesus was there, so it's important to Christians as well as Jews and Muslims. And as part of this, the status quo agreement is that we're allowed to visit. Now, I think Ben-Gvir was right to want to go. I think his timing was terrible, because why pick a fight with the United States and the Arab world in week 1? Now, Netanyahu, who absolutely had to have given his clearance on it, probably figured, well, let's get that out of the way early. And, so it seemed clunky to me, but I think better now, maybe than, 3-4 months from now. But I do think, you said at the margin, but my instinct is that Netanyahu has the real, maybe he's the only person who can make this happen. Because what you're telling me is an update from what I heard. And I can't say what I heard, except that it wasn't inconsistent with what you're saying, but my meetings with MBS were completely off the record. So But then we're also 2.5, 3 years ago now, right? So we're in a different moment. But what you're saying is, what you're hearing is, there is no longer, they're willing to tell you as a key member of a Jewish organization, we're ready to go. We do not have any structural impediments vis-a-vis Israel or the Palestinians. Our issue is with Washington. And that suggests to me that Netanyahu and Biden may be the people that can figure this out. I'll say one other thing, and then I have a couple more quick questions for you. But during you referenced the tension between Obama and Netanyahu. Wow, if there was ever a marriage near breakup, that was as close to a train wreck, I was calling it at the time. But it was a talk about a domestic dispute that was calling, the cops were coming every few minutes. It was a serious problem. But in that, the man whom was the intermediary was Biden. Right. And I think it's interesting that even though Biden fully agreed with President Obama on policy, he was the friendly voice and the intermediary with Bibi. And I think that is going to be an interesting thing here, because the one other positive element is that the new nuclear deal that Biden wants with Iran seems to be dead and buried. Now, if it resurrects like Freddy Krueger or I don't know what, some horror movie, then it's going to be a tension between Netanyahu and Biden. But if that's really off the table, not because of Biden, but because of the Iranians, this allows then Netanyahu to not be in a fight with Biden, but to say, listen, you want to show how hugely pro-Israel you are, and this is a big win as you move into your final 2 years of this administration. So those seem like elements that have me cautiously optimistic in a way that I don't think most people realize, because you have to have been in Saudi Arabia to hear these things. So let's take a moment and say, first, comment on any of that, but then tell me a little bit about your trips, just so we have some context. How long were you there? Who went? Who'd you meet with? Just so we have some way to put this all in context.
Sure. Let me just first comment, Joel, and say, while I agree with everything you said, as I detailed in my article, the three conditions that the Saudis laid out for us, that the improvements they want to see in their relationship with Washington are, some pretty tough things for any current president or administration to do. One, they said they'd like a written document, essentially an American guarantee to come to their support militarily if they are attacked. Whether or not they're talking about a treaty that Congress would have to approve, that would actually be a very high bar to overcome. Second, right, they want a relationship on arms sales that is similar to what Israel has, that we can have all kinds of disagreements, but the security relationship, your willingness to support us with what we need to defend ourselves, is sacrosanct. That's a big lift for where we are right now in that relationship, where from month to month, a single United States senator can stop the arms sale relationship with Saudi Arabia from moving forward. The third thing was on this question of civil nuclear cooperation. The Saudis are intent on building, as part of their economic diversification efforts, a real civil nuclear power industry. But as part of that, they would like at some point in the future the right to enrich uranium, which it's worth noting.
They have reserves. That they can mine.
They can mine, but they want the technology then to enrich, which, of course, if you enrich above 90%, you're enriching in a military style. There's always that threat, which is, of course, what we worry about with the Iranians. The Saudis have some safeguards that they think they could build in to reassure the United States they would never use this for military purposes. But that itself would be a big bar to cross. If you remember the United Arab Emirates several years ago, when they sought a nuclear cooperation deal with the United States, had to agree to a 1, 2, 3 agreement, which meant they forwent forever the right to enrich uranium as part of their civil nuclear power. The Saudis are saying we can't go. We can't do what the UAE did.
Right. The UAE proved, because, well, first of all, UAE doesn't have uranium to enrich, so that was easier. But they did prove that you can have a very calm, peaceful negotiation about peaceful civilian nuclear power in an Arab Muslim context. But yes, the Saudis are different. But see, all of this comes to, there is such deep distrust between Riyadh and Washington. I think under the Trump administration, I would take one issue with one thing you said, but I understand why the Saudis feel this way. I was in Saudi Arabia. We just finished, in 2019, we just finished our meetings with Mohammed bin Salman and the other senior leadership. And just as we were leaving, there was the drone attack on their oil facilities. And I was surprised at that time that Trump's team didn't strike then. However, their defense, the Trump administration's defense, was we took out, Soleimani, the Iranian general, a few months later. So, or, I don't know the exact timing on that, but 6 months later or whatever it was. So I think it was September to January. So whatever. So they believe they did respond, but there is that feeling. I think that the Saudis did trust Trump and his team much more. Pompeo, Pence, the whole team. But because this is so broken now, yes, these are almost maximalist demands, requests, whatever. But to me, it's signaling we don't know whom to trust. And now they're inviting the Chinese in and the Russians. That's a mistake, by the way. In the Cold War, right? The Egyptians could say, "Oh, we're gonna stay with the Soviets," or other countries that were courting us might, play footsie with the Chinese or the Russians. I think the Saudis are making a serious mistake now. They have so little credit in the savings and loan in Washington, much less the American people, to have the Chinese roll in. I know the Chinese buy a lot of oil from them, but the footsie of, well, if you don't come with us, America, we may go other places. They're not going to go places, but it's just infuriating people all the more. So, but again, that's why I'm saying this. It seems like an important marriage that has really gone bad, and I, short of a change in president, right now I'm looking to Netanyahu to see if he can play marriage counselor. But
yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
I agree entirely. And again, Joel, I don't have a sense that these were take it or leave it conditions. They thought them through. They'd like progress on these sorts of things, but that as I say in my piece, the bazaar is open, was my sense, and there's lots of room for a creative diplomacy and for a determined president who's internalized that getting this done is in the vital interests of the United States and our best and most important partner in the region, Israel. And therefore, I'm going to do what I need to do and take whatever political blowback I may need to endure in order to get this done. It's so important for the interests of my country. Let me tell you. I won't spend time on this, but one other thing, it reminds me of the conversation you and I had a few months ago, which is, what's not on that list, but should be, is I think an option for I don't know if Biden would do it because he's not so interested in missile defense, but what the Saudis really need is not just an offensive capacity. They need a defensive capacity. And I think that with Saudi money and Israeli technology and an American green light and support at political levels and some technology levels and others, building a multi-tiered, multi-layered missile and drone defense system to guard the kingdom, but also that's available to the Emiratis, the Bahrainis, arguably others if they want to get involved. But there should be some quid pro quo there, and Israeli even be able to take our levels up. That I think is a recipe for success. Yeah, absolutely. And the good news, Joel, I've got to say that over the last couple of years since the Abraham Accords, I think real progress is being made on this specific issue quite quietly by CENTCOM. I think CENTCOM sees the air and missile defense regional integration as kind of low-hanging fruit. Everybody understands the intensity of the Iranian threat in this space. And now with the Abraham Accords, with Israel's incorporation into CENTCOM, their area of operations. There's a lot actually happening on this issue, and JINSA is working hard on it. We've got a task force on it, and you'll hear more about that hopefully in the coming weeks.
Good, I appreciate it. I look forward to that. Just give us a few minutes, just the flavor. When you went, how long you were in Saudi Arabia, who went with you, who did you meet with, so we have a flavor.
Yeah, no. So again, we went with the Jewish Institute, National Security of America. We went with 8 retired U.S. flag officers, 4 4-stars, 4 3-stars, all with deep experience in the Middle East, including former commander at CENTCOM and former U.S. ambassador to Saudi Arabia under President Trump, General John Abizaid, the former director of the National Security Agency, Admiral Mike Rogers, the former director of the Defense Intelligence Agency, Lieutenant General Bob Ashley, and others. It was a very impressive group. And we saw essentially, without giving away too much, the people you would need to see authoritatively at a political and national security level. In addition to
even the people you saw, if you can't say who you saw, I understand you can't say what each person said, but
yeah, no, we met with the top. We met with the Crown Prince. We met with the defense minister, with the foreign minister. We met with the head of the Navy, the commander of the Air Force, the people in charge of their defense transformation at the Ministry of Defense, the person in charge of their military industries. We probably saw somebody I know that you probably know well. We had a lovely day at the Muslim World League with Sheikh Mohammed Al Isa. We went, of course, to Etidal, the Countering Extremism Center. We got a chance to go see a really terrific interactive exhibit they now have on Neom in Riyadh that covers 3 warehouses and gives you a total picture and the scope of the ambition that he's trying to achieve there, as well as a fantastic historical site project they have going on in Diriyah, outside of Riyadh, which is a major giga project, $50-60 billion worth itself. So got a real flavor. Went to, out on the town to just taste the what the nightlife is now like there, the restaurants, the cafes, the theaters, the music in public. This is another thing that you come away with. Maybe one of the main takeaways, Joel, as somebody who's been in the kingdom, well in excess of 10 times over the last 30 years, just the scope of the change in that place, the empowerment of women, the efforts to really crack down and eradicate the most extremist versions of Islam, not only that are being propagated in the kingdom through their textbooks and media and their mosques, but what they're exporting overseas through groups like the World Muslim League. It's changed dramatically to a much more moderate, tolerant version of the faith that I think is just incredibly important. If you add all that together, those reforms with the willingness now to have a really historic breakthrough in their relations with Israel. It's if you had asked me 20 years ago on September the 12th, 2011, as I was sitting in my White House office, still watching the smoke rise from the Pentagon, that you would have had the Saudis empowering women, cracking down on religious extremism, and being willing to make peace with Israel, I would have said, Dayenu, it's enough, God, if that's what you do in terms of moving the Saudis forward into the 21st century as an important ally of the United States. And now we've got it.
Yeah, go ahead and finish your point. Sorry.
No, we have it now really there in front of us, and but we need President Biden and the United States to kind of embrace this strategic opportunity that will be good, of course, for the region, but so important for the United States, given our long history there and a lot of the pain and sacrifices we've made there. We have a potential to make things much, much better.
Well, John, it's a fascinating trip, and you absolutely thank you for sharing, because I wasn't sure if you were unwilling to, not allowed to share who you met with. But that is the top of the greasy pole, as it were, and it gives even more depth and meaning to your perceptions coming out. I will say, last thing is I appreciate your service, not only to the United States as a whole, but specifically to the Bush administration and to Vice President Dick Cheney. It'd be interesting to see if former President George W. Bush and former Vice President Dick Cheney, I guess I would say I would recommend that Netanyahu go reach out to them privately, quietly, because they have a lot of trust with the Saudis over the years. They've certainly had criticisms of the Saudis over the years, but my goodness, your former boss, Cheney, was the defense secretary when we moved literally, well, not literally heaven and earth, but we moved 500,000 troops to come rescue the kingdom, and dealing with Saddam, and then dealing with all the mess of the aftermath of Saddam was in American interest. But it also safeguarded the Saudis and the Israelis and everybody, any peace-loving person in this region. So they have an enormous amount of trust, and it'd be interesting to see if there's wisdom that, hopefully the Biden administration would reach out to them too. Bush is the paragon of being a bipartisan person willing to chat behind the scenes and help. So this is such an important relationship. I appreciate the insights that you've given. They really are, I think, the latest and most detailed and most encouraging that I've heard, and I appreciate you sharing them with us.
Absolutely, Joel. Thank you so much. And really thanks to your audience. God bless and good luck.
We'll keep praying for the peace of Jerusalem, and let's hope that we've got another peace treaty coming soon. Thank you so much, John.